There is something nobody warns you about before you wake up. Not your meditation teacher. Not the books you read. Not the podcasts you binged at 2 in the morning when you could not sleep and something inside you was restless and reaching for something more. Nobody sits you down and says, "Hey, just so you know, once you start seeing through the game, you are going to lose the will to keep playing it." And that is going to be terrifying. But that is exactly what happens for a lot of people. And if it is happening to you right now, I want you to know something before we go any further. You are not broken. You are not depressed. And you are definitely not losing your mind. What you are experiencing has a name. It has a psychological framework. And more importantly, it has a path through it. Today we are going to walk that path together. We are going to talk about why genuine inner growth tends to hollow you out before it fills you back up. Why the things that used to light you up now feel like they belong to someone else. Why ambition, goals, hustle, and drive can feel almost embarrassing after a certain point in your development. And most importantly, we are going to talk about what actually replaces all of that when you are ready for it. So let us start at the beginning. And the beginning, for our purposes, is a question. Have you ever worked incredibly hard towards something, finally gotten it, and then stood there holding it, wondering why it did not feel the way you thought it would? Maybe it was the promotion. Maybe it was the relationship. Maybe it was the number in your bank account you had been grinding toward for years. You got the thing, and instead of satisfaction, you got this strange, hollow feeling. Like the prize was real, but the part of you that was supposed to enjoy it had already moved on. That feeling is not a glitch. That feeling is a signal. And if you have experienced it more than once, or if it has started bleeding into everything, into your work, your relationships, your goals, your morning routine, then you are likely in the middle of something that is uncomfortable but actually quite important. Psychologists who study inner development have long recognized a phase that happens during significant personal growth. It is the period between who you used to be and who you are becoming. The old identity starts to lose its grip. The things that used to drive you, the approval, the status, the fear of falling behind, start to feel less real. But the new sense of self has not fully come online yet. So you are left in this in-between space where you feel awake to something but you are not quite sure what to do with it. This gap is not comfortable. In fact, for most people, it is one of the more disorienting experiences of their adult lives. Because from the outside, nothing has really changed. Your life looks the same. But on the inside, the engine that used to run the whole thing has gone quiet. And you are standing in the silence, wondering if something is seriously wrong with you. Here is what I want to offer you. That silence is not emptiness. That silence is space. And it matters a great deal what you do with it. Let us talk about motivation for a second, because I think we have a fundamentally flawed understanding of what motivation actually is in this culture. We tend to think of motivation as this fuel you either have or you do not. You are either fired up and ready to go, or you are dragging yourself through the day. And when people say they have lost their motivation, the assumption is that something broke down, that they need to find it again, that they need a new goal, a new vision board, a new morning routine, a new podcast, a new set of habits to get the engine running again. But here is the thing. Not all motivation is the same. In fact, there are two fundamentally different sources of it, and they feel completely different in your body and your life. The first kind of motivation, the kind most people spend their whole lives operating from, is built on a foundation of lack. It is the kind that says, if I achieve this, then I will be enough. If I earn this much, then I will feel safe. If I reach this level, then people will respect me. If I build this kind of life, then I will finally feel like I matter. This motivation is incredibly effective. By the way, it can move mountains. It built most of the civilizations we live in. It is responsible for a stunning percentage of human accomplishment, but it has a fatal flaw. It is never satisfied, because the premise is wrong. You are never arriving at enough. You are always chasing a finish line that moves every time you get close. The second kind of motivation is different. It does not come from lack. It comes from something closer to love. Not romantic love necessarily, but the kind of love that shows up when you are so fully yourself that your actions become an expression of what you actually are, rather than what you are trying to prove. This motivation is quieter. It does not scream at you. It does not bully you out of bed. It does not rely on fear or shame or the anxiety of falling behind. It whispers. It invites. It calls you towards something without grabbing you by the collar and dragging you there. Now here is where the spiritual awakening piece becomes so important. When people go through genuine inner transformation, and by that I mean the kind that actually restructures the way you see yourself in the world, one of the first things that tends to go is that first kind of motivation. The fear-based, lack-based, prove yourself kind. And that feels like a crisis. Because that first kind of motivation was the only thing most of us have ever known. Let me share a story that illustrates this in a way I think you will recognize. Imagine a woman. We will call her Rachel. Rachel spent her 30s doing everything right. She built a successful career in marketing. She had a full social life, a nice apartment, a fitness routine. By every external measure, she was crushing it. But somewhere in her mid-30s, something started shifting. She started meditating, not aggressively, just 20 minutes in the morning. She started reading more widely, exploring ideas outside her professional lane. She started paying closer attention to the gap between how her life looked and how it felt from the inside. And then one day, sitting at her desk looking at a campaign she had just finished, a campaign she had poured weeks into, she felt nothing. And that nothing scared her more than any failure ever had. Over the following months, the nothing spread. She stopped caring about her performance reviews. The social events she used to look forward to started feeling like performances. She quit her gym because going felt like going through motions she no longer believed in. And she spent a lot of time lying on her couch. Not sad exactly, but hollow, wondering what was wrong with her. What was happening to Rachel is something that happens to a lot of people who take their inner lives seriously. She was in the middle of a real dissolution. The scaffolding that her identity had been built on, the ambition, the social approval, the productivity, the constant forward momentum, was coming apart. Not because she failed, because she had grown past it. The problem was that nobody told her this was a natural part of the process. So she spent those months treating herself like someone who needed to be fixed. She tried new productivity systems. She read self-help books. She went to a life coach. She signed up for a course on finding your purpose. All of which made the emptiness worse, because they were all trying to restart an engine that was never actually meant to run on the old fuel again. What Rachel actually needed, and what most people in this phase need, is not a fix. It is a framework, a way of understanding what is happening so that you can stop fighting it and start moving through it. Let us build that framework right now. When human beings go through significant transformation, whether that is through spiritual practice, therapy, grief, illness, or simply the accumulated weight of living honestly, the process tends to follow a pattern. It is not a straight line. It is more like a cycle with 3 distinct phases. The first phase is dissolution. This is where you are if you have lost your drive, your enthusiasm, your appetite for the goals that used to matter to you. The old structure of your identity is breaking down. The values and desires and self-concepts that organized your life are losing their charge. And this feels awful because we are not taught to value dissolution. We are taught to value building, accumulating, achieving. But dissolution is essential. You cannot plant new seeds in soil that is already packed with old roots. The key to moving through dissolution consciously, rather than getting stuck in it, is what we might call intentional release. Instead of trying to revive what is dying, you acknowledge it. You honor it. You say, "This motivation served me. It got me here. And it is no longer mine to carry." You do not force yourself to feel grateful for it. You just stop fighting its departure. One practical way to do this is to write honestly about what your old motivations were actually built on. Not the story you told yourself about why you wanted what you wanted, but the real foundation. Was it fear of being ordinary? Fear of ending up like someone in your family? Fear of not being loved if you were not achieving? Was it the need to prove something to someone who doubted you? Getting clear on those real foundations is not about judgment. It is about release. You cannot let go of something you are still pretending is not there. The second phase is the gap. This is the hardest phase, and the one most people misidentify as a problem. The gap is the space between dissolution and renewal. It is the place where your old identity has released, but your new one has not arrived yet. In this phase, you may feel purposeless, directionless, maybe even a little depressed. You might find yourself envying people who are clearly still operating from the old, fear-based motivation, because at least they seem to be going somewhere. Do not envy them. They are running a race that has no finish line. You have stepped off that track for a reason. The gap is actually a sacred space, even though it does not feel sacred. It feels uncomfortable and awkward, and like something you need to escape as quickly as possible. But the people who learn to be in the gap without panicking, the people who can sit in the not knowing without immediately filling it with noise and busyness and distraction, those are the people who discover what comes next. And what comes next is worth waiting for. In the gap, your job is simply to pay attention. Not to your thoughts about what you should want, not to what the culture says a successful, driven, ambitious person looks like, but to the subtle, quiet signals coming from somewhere deeper. The things that catch your eye when you are not trying to be productive. The conversations that light something up in your chest. The problems in the world that make you feel something when you let yourself actually feel it. The activities that make you lose track of time. These are breadcrumbs. You do not need to turn them into a business plan. You do not need to monetize them or optimize them or build a brand around them. You just need to notice them and follow them a little and see what happens. The third phase is emergence. This is where a new kind of motivation starts to come online. It is quieter than what you had before. It does not announce itself. It does not arrive with a trumpet blast of inspiration. It tends to show up as a pull, a persistent, gentle pull towards something. Not the frantic push of fear-based striving, but an invitation. People describe this differently. Some say it feels like remembering something they forgot. Some say it feels like finally doing what they were actually built for. Some say it does not feel like motivation at all, more like breathing. The crucial thing to understand about emergence is that you cannot force it. You can create conditions that make it more likely. You can clear the space for it by doing the dissolution work. You can pay attention to the breadcrumbs in the gap. You can take small actions aligned with the new impulses you are noticing. But you cannot manufacture it on demand. And this is deeply uncomfortable for people who have spent their lives believing that results come from effort. Because the effort required in this phase is almost the opposite of what you are used to. The effort here is the effort of not forcing. The effort of trusting a process you cannot fully see or control. Let me tell you about what Rachel eventually discovered, because I think it matters. After about 18 months of what she described as wandering in the fog, Rachel started noticing something. Every time she spent time with the young niece she sometimes babysat, she felt genuinely alive in a way she had not felt in years. Not productive, not impressive, just alive. Her niece asked endless questions about everything, and Rachel found herself not just answering them but actually thinking about them, wondering, exploring. She started reading more about how children learn. She started spending time in libraries. She started volunteering at an after-school program in her neighborhood, not because she had a plan, but because something in her kept pulling toward it. And slowly, without any kind of strategy or 5-year plan, a new orientation began to take shape. Not a career, not yet, but a direction. Something real. The motivation she feels now is not the same as the motivation that drove her through her 30s. She is not trying to prove anything. She is not chasing approval. She is not outrunning a fear. She is moving towards something because it genuinely calls her. And here is what is remarkable about that. She works harder now than she ever did before, but she does not experience it as hard. She experiences it as natural. That is the difference between the two kinds of motivation. The first kind is a grind, even when you are winning. The second kind is more like flowing downhill. There is still friction. There are still hard days, but you are moving with your nature instead of against it. Now let us talk about something practical, because I know some of you listening to this are in real pain right now. You are not floating through a philosophical transition. You have bills to pay. You have people depending on you. You cannot just sit in the gap indefinitely and wait for cosmic guidance to show up. Here is what I would suggest. Distinguish between outer functioning and inner orientation. You can keep doing what needs to be done, fulfilling your responsibilities, showing up for your people, paying your bills, even going to work every day, without buying back into the belief that those things define your worth or determine your destiny. You can function in your life without being consumed by it. Many people in genuine transition actually discover that they become more effective at the practical stuff, not less, once they release the anxiety that used to fuel it. Second, take your attention seriously. What are you drawn to when there is no pressure? What problems make you feel something when you let yourself feel? What would you spend your time on if nobody was watching and nothing was being measured? These questions are not hobbies questions. They are identity questions. And the answers are data about who you are actually becoming. Third, let yourself be a beginner again. One of the hallmarks of the emergence phase is that the new direction often involves doing something you have no expertise in. And after years of being competent, maybe even exceptional, in your old lane, being a beginner can feel humiliating. Do not let it. Competence can be rebuilt. The pull toward something real cannot be manufactured. Fourth, be extremely selective about who you talk to about this. Not everyone in your life is equipped to support someone moving through genuine transformation. Some people will try to motivate you back into the old way of operating. Some will worry about you and project their own fear of purposelessness onto your transition. Find the one or two people in your life, or in your extended community, who have been through something similar and came out the other side. Their presence and perspective will do more for you than any productivity system or motivational content ever could. And fifth, and this is probably the most important one, stop measuring your progress by the metrics of the old life. The old metrics were things like income, title, output, efficiency, recognition, and those are not bad things. But they are not the whole story of a human life. And they are absolutely not the right measurements for a season of genuine transformation. The metrics that actually matter in this phase are quieter. Things like, am I more honest than I was 6 months ago? Am I more present with the people I love? Am I following the small pulls even when they do not make logical sense? Am I less afraid of who I am? Am I spending time on things that feel real rather than things that look good? Those are the measurements that actually tell you something useful about where you are in the process. Here is the bigger picture I want to leave you with. We live in a culture that is almost entirely organized around the first kind of motivation. The fear-based, lack-based, achieve or you are nothing kind. And that culture produces an enormous amount of material output. It also produces an enormous amount of quiet suffering. People who have done everything right and still feel fundamentally unsatisfied. People who are successful by every external measure and secretly wonder if any of it means anything. Genuine inner growth, the real kind that changes how you see yourself and the world, is a direct challenge to that system. Because when you actually wake up to the mechanics of the old motivation, when you really see clearly that you are running on fear and the approval of others, you cannot pretend anymore that it is enough. And that moment of clarity, as disorienting as it is not a crisis. It is a threshold. The question is whether you back away from it, squeeze yourself back into the old shape, and pick up the old ambitions again, even though they no longer fit, or whether you do the harder, slower, more uncertain work of discovering what actually comes next. Most people back away. Not because they are weak, but because nobody tells them that the disorientation is temporary. Nobody tells them that there is a third option beyond going back to the old way and remaining stuck in the void. Nobody tells them that the emptiness they are feeling is not the end of something, but the beginning of something that is going to be far more sustainable and far more real. You now know there is a third option. You are not losing yourself. You are losing the version of yourself that was built to survive circumstances you have already outgrown. And what comes next, if you can stay in the process long enough, is the kind of motivation that does not require constant maintenance or management. The kind that moves through you, rather than being forced by you. The kind that can actually hold the weight of a whole life. That is worth waiting for. That is worth sitting in the discomfort for. And if you are in the middle of it right now, here is what I want you to take with you today. You are not behind. You are not broken. You are not failing at life. You are in the middle of one of the most important things a human being can move through. And the fact that you are asking these questions, that you are sitting with the discomfort instead of numbing it out, that you are still paying attention even when attention feels like it has nothing to land on, that means you are doing it right. Keep going, not forward in the old sense, not back toward what used to drive you, just through the gap, through the quiet, through the not knowing. On the other side of that is something that belongs entirely to you.